At dawn, with cold gravel snapping under your boots and pine-scented air sitting sharp in your chest, the thing that moves least is often the thing that changes the whole horizon. That is how the mountain speaks, chosen one, with presence. Number one, it does not introduce itself, it simply stands. Look at it, the dark line of rock against a pale sky, the frost caught in the cracks, the slow fog sliding past its lower face while the upper ridge stays clear, almost stern. A mountain never runs downhill to explain why it belongs there. It never chases the road curling around its base. It never pleads with the river to stop talking. It remains, and everything else must answer to that shape. That is why this word is for you. People mistook your stillness for emptiness. They saw you hold your peace and assumed you had no power. They watched you stay rooted in truth and called it weakness because restless souls cannot recognize strength unless it shouts. But heaven has always loved this pattern. Divine timing does not rush to impress the impatient. Grace does not scramble to defend itself before every suspicious eye. Light does not panic because darkness is loud for a season. And that unsettles your observers more than they want to admit. They expected motion from you. They expected chasing, explaining, proving, reaching, pleading. Instead, they met something solid, something that would not bend itself into a smaller shape just to make unstable people comfortable. That is what shook them. Your calm. And here is where the lesson grows teeth. This giant was not lifted in a weekend. The stone rose by pressure. Deep, slow, grinding pressure, where massive plates met and pushed for ages below the surface. What looked silent above ground was already becoming height underneath. So when people mocked your slow season, they were laughing at geology they could not see. When they judged the pace of your life, they judged a holy process they did not understand. You were not being buried by pressure. You were being raised by it. If that truth is landing in your spirit, take a second to like and subscribe, because the next thing they never understood is this. The peak they can see is only a fraction of what is really holding you up. And that is where the eye gets humbled. Because what you can see above the clouds is not the whole body of the thing at all. Number two, the height you see is held by what you cannot see. Stand near the ridge long enough and you start to notice it in small ways. The air is thinner up high, yes, but the ground under your boots feels thick, old, packed with a weight that does not announce itself. Loose grit skims off the edge. A little stream of meltwater whispers past the rock, and still, the whole mass stays set. Why? Because the peak is only the visible sign. Far below the grass line, below the cold ledges, below the dark seams where water disappears, hidden roots of stone reach down into the crust like an iceberg turned inside out. More of it is buried than displayed. More of it is carrying than performing. Chosen one, do you hear me? So shallow eyes misread you. They measured your visible season and thought they had measured your strength. They did not count the buried years. They did not count the prayers whispered into ceilings no one saw. The nights when your chest felt tight and you still chose grace. The mornings when truth cost you comfort and you held it anyway. They saw a calm face and assumed a simple life. They saw silence and imagined emptiness. But those who live by appearance always make the same mistake around real depth. They think what is above the surface is the whole structure. It never is. With a mountain or a soul, God has been anchoring in secret. And this is exactly why certain observers became uneasy around you without fully knowing why. They could not find an easy place to push. Their words slid off. Their bait did not hook cleanly. Their little tests came back unanswered, not because you were unaware, but because there was more beneath you than they had access to. They were trying to move a summit while ignoring the foundation. That is the arrogance of unstable people. They mock what they cannot map. They poke at what they cannot possess. Then they call it strange when it will not fall. But here's the turn they never expected. Sometimes the same height that reveals deep strength also pulls weather out of the sky itself. And when moist air meets stone, storms do not ask permission before they gather. And most people never see this coming. The same height that looks so quiet from a distance can pull a whole sky into motion. Number 3. It does not only endure the weather, it helps call it down. You can hear it before you understand it. Wind slips through the pines with that dry, whispering hiss. Damp air climbs the slope, cooler and cooler, until the clouds thicken like wool dragged across stone. Then the smell changes. Wet earth, crushed needles, cold mineral, the sharp scent that comes right before rain. This place does something to the atmosphere. It forces moist air upward, and when that rising air cools, the sky lets go. Storms break against its slopes while the summit stands above the scramble. Chosen one, listen carefully. Some of the turbulence around you did not begin because you were wrong. It began because your presence lifted hidden things into the open. That is why certain people started acting strange when they got near your ground. What looked stable at lower levels began to sweat, shake, and gather static when it met your elevation. Words got sharper. Masks slipped faster. Little comments carried more poison than they used to. Why? Because height reveals weather that flat land can hide. You were not imagining the tension. You were standing where pressure rises. And the ones who wanted to call you difficult, cold, or too much were often just uncomfortable because truth was condensing around them. Their own motives were becoming visible. Their own insecurity was turning into thunder. Their own hidden unrest was finally getting somewhere to break. This is why your calm unsettled them. You were not pretending. You were not untouched. But because while all that noise was gathering, the summit stands. You did not have to clap back at every rumble in the clouds. You did not have to chase every voice trying to drag you downhill into confusion. You stayed where grace had placed you. And in that place, their drama became forecast, not command. Their mood did not become your marching order. Their pressure did not become your personality. Still, do not romanticize it. Rain hitting stone long enough can sting. Fog can close in so thick you can barely see the next ledge. Thunder can roll through the ribs like a warning. This place knows what it is to be struck again and again by what it helped lift. And that brings us to the next holy mystery. If the weather keeps coming for the height, why has the height not been worn away by now? And the answer is not that the blows are weak. The answer is that wearing down and standing firm are not the same thing. Number 4, it is always being touched by loss, and still it remains. Come close after a hard season and you can see the evidence. Pebbles gathered at the foot of a cliff. Thin ribbons of mud where rain pulled at the slope. A sharp edge rounded off by wind. Ice opening hairline cracks in the dark face, then thaw loosening another little piece by morning. The place is never left alone. Water worries at it. Cold tests it. Heat opens it. Gravity keeps calling pieces downward. Erosion does not sleep. That matters, chosen one, Because some of you were taught that if you were truly protected, you would never feel the scrape of life. But this high ground tells the truth. Even the strong are weathered. Even what carries glory can feel the drag of constant contact. So, no, you were not weak because certain seasons took something out of you. You were not faithless because you felt tired after long exposure. Stone can be ancient and still bear fresh scars. A ridge can hold its line and still shed dust into the valley below. That is not failure. That is the cost of standing in open air. And the people who judged you for showing the marks of the climb revealed how little they understand about anything real. They wanted a symbol with no strain, a witness with no wear, a height with no history. But truth does not come polished for the comfort of spectators. Grace does not mean you never ache. Light does not mean the wind stops blowing. This is also why the calm that unsettled them was so powerful. It was not the calm of someone untouched. It was the calm of something that had been hit, chilled, soaked, scraped, and still would not come out of form. They thought if enough pressure kept landing on you, eventually you would give them the collapse they were waiting for. They watched for bitterness. They listened for panic. They leaned in for the crack. Yet all they really saw was evidence that you had been shaped, not shattered. Still, let me be honest with you. Pieces do fall. Dust does gather. Time does leave its fingerprints. And if that were the whole story, every height would eventually be reduced to rubble and memory. But there is another movement happening under all that weather, one your doubters never counted at all. Because while the surface is being worn, something beneath may still be lifting. And that hidden lift changes everything. Because now you are no longer looking at a monument to damage, but at a place where loss and increase are happening at the same time. Number 5. While the surface is being worn, the deeper body may still be rising. You can feel that truth in the land even when your eyes miss it. A ledge crumbles here, a slope loosens there, gravel clicks downhill after a cold night, and yet the range is not finished. In many places, the push from below is still greater than the scraping from above. The face is weathered, yes, but the backbone is still being raised. Chosen one, this is where your observers lost the plot. They counted what fell from you. They counted the friendships that thinned, the ease that left, the softness that had to become discernment. They counted your tired days, your quiet seasons, your reduced tolerance for foolishness. And because they only know how to measure what can be picked up off the ground, they mistook your shedding for your shrinking. But heaven measures differently. Divine timing does not panic over what had to slough off. Truth is not frightened by what cannot go with you. Grace is not always gentle in appearance. Sometimes it comes like pressure beneath old stone, lifting you even while pieces of an outdated life slide away. So your peace confused them. They thought erosion was victory. They thought if enough little things were taken, enough disappointments stacked up, enough cold winds passed over you, then eventually you would flatten into something common, easier to cross, easier to dismiss. Instead, what they met was stranger and stronger. A life that looked stripped in places, but somehow stood taller with time. That bothers people who rely on appearances. They know how to celebrate a collapse. They do not know what to do with a soul that seems to lose and still gains altitude. They become unsettled when calm survives abrasion. They grow suspicious when light keeps showing through cracks they expected to become ruin. And that is because they have built their whole understanding on a lie. If something hurts, it must be ending. The high places say otherwise. Pain can be real and still not be final. Where can be visible and still not be the ruling story. Listen, that is a hard truth to accept when you are standing in the wind, hearing pebbles skip down the slope. But the land keeps testifying. What falls away is not always the part that carries destiny. And once a place learns that kind of strength, it stops running after anything at all. And that changes the whole posture of the land. Because once a height knows what it stops hurrying to be recognized. Number 6, it rises without chasing. Watch the way the road behaves near it. Asphalt curves, guardrails bend, switchbacks stack one above another, as if human intention itself had to slow down and reconsider. The river does the same thing in its own language, veering off, cutting around stone, folding itself through the valley because it cannot command the mass to move aside. Even the wind gets shaped here. It slips, lifts, curls, and spills along ridges it did not design. This place does not run after any of it. It does not lunge at the weather. It does not stretch itself toward the highway. It remains, and everything restless must learn to go around. Chosen one, that is where your power began to trouble people. When you stopped chasing what had no authority to define you, when your peace no longer ran after every closed door, when your truth no longer begged every doubtful voice for a fair hearing. The unstable could feel the change, and it bothered them more than they admitted. Because people who live by reaction expect access. They expect to pull your attention with noise, steer your mood with pressure, bend your day with one sharp word. But when they met a stillness they could not redirect, they felt something they hate: irrelevance. Do you see how accusing they became then? The road never calls the slope arrogant, but people do. The river never calls the cliff cold, but people do. Restless minds invent insults for anything they cannot move. They call groundedness pride. They call boundaries cruelty. They call holy distance rejection. Yet the land keeps preaching the same sermon, with dust, stone, and silence. What is firmly placed does not need to chase approval. What is rooted in divine timing does not panic when others rush past making a show of momentum. And still, do not mistake this for emptiness. Stillness is not absence. The place is busy in deeper ways: water gathering in cracks, frost working seams, old pressure holding the whole shape together. Calm can look quiet while carrying tremendous force. That is why your observers misread you. They thought non-pursuit meant passivity. They thought because you were no longer scrambling, you had somehow lost hunger. No, you had finally stopped bowing to what was beneath your calling. But once a thing refuses to chase, something else always happens. Those who cannot move it begin to name it, judge it, and tell stories about what it means. And that is exactly what happened. Number 7. When they could not move it, they started naming it. They did not say, "This place is too steady for us." No, they turned the steady thing into a problem. They called the slope arrogant. They called the silence cold. They called the distance rejection. That is what restless people do when they stand before something they cannot control. They do not confess their own limits. They accuse the mountain. And chosen one, that is why your calm unsettled them so deeply. You were not arguing with their words, so they had no easy way to make you look unstable. You were not running after their approval, so they could not trap you in the usual dance. You just stayed there, and the summit stands. So they made stories. They twisted motives. They put your stillness under a dirty little lamp and acted like they had discovered something. But truth does not change because impatient mouths rename it. A ridge is still a ridge. Stone is still stone. Hidden roots of stone do not disappear just because somebody with a loud opinion cannot see them. The people watching you wanted a softer shape, something they could flatten, explain, and file away. Instead, they found a form that rose without chasing, and that made them nervous. Because the moment they had to invent a false story, they admitted the real one was out of their reach. And this is the part that stings their pride. They were not reacting to your cruelty, they were reacting to your restraint. They wanted you to shout so they could call you emotional. They wanted you to beg so they could call you weak. They wanted you to move first, lose first, blink first. But you did not give them that. You let their own mouths reveal their own fear. You let their own labels expose their own need to control the narrative. So the whispering got worse, not better. When people cannot bend a thing, they start trying to define it instead. But definition is not dominion, and the high ground knows the difference. Now the air around you is changing again, and the ones who named you are beginning to notice they may have named the wrong thing. Number 8. The ones who cannot move it start explaining it. They stand there with dust on their shoes and weather in their faces, and suddenly every word turns into a little label. Cold, arrogant, distant, hard to know. But that is frustration wearing a name tag. The mountain never asked to be liked. It never chased a better story. The summit stands, and the people who expected it to bow are the ones left uncomfortable. They point at the height as if naming it gives them power over it, but all they are really doing is admitting they cannot cross it. You saw that happen around you. The same kind of mouths that wanted a reaction from you kept reaching for explanations when you gave them none. They wanted your calm to mean surrender, so they kept talking, kept measuring, kept trying to make your stillness look suspicious. And the more they spoke, the more obvious it became that they were not describing you at all. They were describing their own fear of anything they could not steer. That is what hidden roots of stone do to shallow minds. They make every accusation bounce back louder than it left. So you stayed quiet. Your silence was already saying enough. A ridge does not argue with the wind. A real height does not hurry to correct every bad opinion at the base. It just remains, and the light keeps changing around it until the truth shows itself on its own. Their little names began to feel thin. The moment they tried to shrink you into a word, they exposed how small their own frame was. They thought they were defining the place. Really, they were revealing themselves. And that is what unsettles them most. Your refusal to give them one. Not your collapse, but your shape. They wanted you to prove them right. Instead, you kept standing there, and the view kept getting clearer. But now the clouds are thinning, and when the next line of light hits the rock, the same names may not fit anymore. Number 9. High ground can feel lonely before it feels holy. The air up here is thinner. You notice it in your lungs first, then in the silence. The wind comes clean over the rock, carrying pine resin, cold dust, and that faint wet smell that follows a late cloud. Below, the valley keeps moving. Roads, roofs, little flashes of water. But up here, the shape stands apart. That is the part people rarely talk about. Sometimes it feels like being left with your own heartbeat and nothing else. And yet, chosen one, that loneliness was not proof of abandonment. It was proof that the old crowd could not follow where truth had taken you. The mountain has always done this. It rises without chasing, And because it does, some people mistake distance for rejection. They wanted you near only when you were easy to reach, easy to read, easy to pull into their weather. But when grace started setting boundaries and light started asking for honesty, the room got smaller for them, not you. That is why they went quiet. Or worse, why they started telling stories about how different you had become. They were not mourning your loss, they were grieving their access. And still, you kept standing. You learned that solitude can sharpen discernment. It can strip off the little lies that crowd a life. It can make one honest thought louder than 100 voices. There is a strange mercy in that. The valley noise fades, and suddenly you hear what matters, what is real, what is borrowed, what was only ever attached to your peace for convenience. That is what hidden roots of stone do. They hold a life steady while the upper world changes its mind. But do not miss this. High places also attract watchers. Not everyone who looks up is coming with clean hands. Some are admiring. Some are measuring. Some are already planning how to get close without changing themselves. And just now, through the mist, there is a figure on the lower path who has stopped walking. They are looking straight up at the rock, and they do not look comfortable at all. Number 10. Not every climber loves the mountain. Not every climber loves the mountain. Some come with steady steps and honest eyes. Others come with soft hands, looking like peace while measuring the rock for leverage. You know the difference now, chosen one. The gravel tells on them. The way they pause before each ledge tells on them. The way their breathing changes when the path narrows tells on them. The mountain has a way of revealing intent without saying a word. That is why your calm kept unsettling people. Because calm does not flatter false motives, it exposes them. So let them come. Let them stand in the thin air and pretend they belong there. A real height does not need to chase anybody away. It just stands, and the false ones start to slip in their own minds. They wanted your closeness only if it came easy. They wanted your trust without cost. They wanted access to what you had built without respecting the hidden roots of stone underneath it. But the higher you rose, the less room there was for performance. Your silence did not invite their masks. It pulled them off. And that is where the accusation in them grew louder, because you did not attack. They wanted a mountain that would bend into a doorway for their comfort. Instead, they found a boundary. They wanted a life they could touch without changing. Instead, they found truth. And truth has weight. It makes the air feel different. It makes the tongue dry out. It makes people choose between reverence and resentment. There is no easy third road up here. You can almost hear it now, can't you? The wind shifting around the ridge. A loose stone tapping once, then stopping. The one on the lower path has stopped walking again. And this time, they are not just looking up. They are looking around, like they expected the mountain to have moved when they were not watching. But it has not moved. It still rises without chasing. And that is exactly why their next step is going to tell you everything. And that next step is never small up here. Number 11. Truth gets steeper the higher it goes. The path narrows along the shoulder. Loose shale shifts under the edge of a boot, and the sound skips down the face in little clicks until it disappears into brush below. The air is colder now, thinner, cleaner. There is less room for pretending on a slope like this. A broad trail can carry almost anybody for a while, but a steep one starts sorting motives fast. That is one of the oldest sermons the rock preaches. It does not argue with false footing, it simply reveals it. And chosen one, that is what your life began to do by incline. The higher the climb, the less a person can carry that does not belong. Heavy lies start dragging, borrowed masks slip, performances run out of breath. That is why the uneasy ones grew more unsettled around your peace. They were fine when the ground was flat and everything could be staged. But when truth started rising under their feet, the angle changed. Suddenly, what they said did not match how they stood. What they claimed did not match what they could sustain. You did not have to expose every false thing by hand. Height did it for you. The grade itself did the sorting. That part people hate about real elevation. It is merciful, but it is not soft on pretending. Grace will receive a sincere soul, yes, but grace will also strip a counterfeit one of its comfort. Light does not merely shine, it tests, and the summit stands while all that testing happens below it. Your calm felt so threatening to people who depended on confusion. Your stillness offered them no place to pin their performance. Your boundaries gave them no flat stage. Around you, truth became steep. Listen to the ridge for a second. Wind across bare stone, a drip of meltwater falling from one cold lip to another. Then silence. Then one more scrape from the lower path. The watcher is moving again, but slower now. Careful, measured, because deep down they know what the slope is asking. Not admiration, not flattery, but honesty. And honesty is expensive at this height. Now the question is no longer whether the climb will reveal them. It is what happens when they realize the mountain was never trying to block them at all, only to show them what they were made of. And that is the turn the slope always forces. If it cannot be moved, everything around it has to choose a new path. Number 12. What cannot command the height must bend around it. You see it most clearly from above. The river does not win by argument. It curves. The road does not conquer by stubbornness. It loops, doubles back, cuts a long, pale line through the trees, and settles for a different route. Even the wind, for all its noise, gets redirected along ridges and drawn into hollows it did not choose. This place does not negotiate with any of them. It does not step aside. It remains, and movement reorganizes itself around that fact. Chosen one. That is what started happening once your peace became real. You did not have to control every room. You did not have to chase every misunderstanding. You simply stopped being available for every current, and suddenly the currents had to reroute. That is what unsettled them. Not domination. Structure. They were used to people who could be pulled off course with a little pressure, a little guilt, a little bait. But when they met your stillness, their usual route failed. Their words had to go elsewhere. Their schemes had to circle. Their access got narrower. They called that difficult because they had never learned to respect a boundary they did not place there themselves. Yet the land keeps telling the truth. A river that cannot pass through stone does not accuse the stone of cruelty. It learns the shape of reality and bends. And some did bend, whether they wanted to admit it or not. The same restless forces that once rushed straight at you started spending energy finding side routes, softer angles, different tones. That was your form creating consequence. Divine timing had done something in you firm enough that chaos could no longer treat you like open ground. The old shortcuts closed. The old manipulations lost their clean line. Around a settled height, even disorder has to work harder. Listen to the sounds down there. Water folding around rock. the faint hush of tires on a distant curve, wind spilling off the shoulder and changing direction halfway down. Nothing stops moving. It just stops moving as if the mountain were not there. And that is a lesson in itself. Because sometimes the hardest season is not when the storm hits, but when cloud settles over the peak so thick that even the height seems to disappear. And that is when faith gets tested the hardest. Not when the rock is struck, but when the peak slips out of sight. Number 13, hidden is not gone. Cloud does this without asking. One minute the upper face is clear, gray stone, pale snow in the cracks, a clean line against the sky. The next minute, mist rolls in low and thick, and the ridge disappears as if somebody pulled a white veil across the whole crown. Sound changes too. Wind gets muffled. Drips seem closer. Even the birds keep lower. From the valley, people start talking like the height itself has vanished. But it is not. The summit stands whether eyes can trace it or not. Chosen one, hear the accusation inside this lesson. Some people only believe in what they can currently see. When your clarity was visible, they had comments. When your peace became quiet and your path entered fog, they assumed you had lost your way. That is how shallow judgment works. It mistakes concealment for collapse. It sees a hidden season and calls it failure. But the mountain does not stop being high because cloud wraps around it. Its weight does not shrink. Its shape does not surrender. Its old pressure, its deep structure, its truth. None of that disappears just because visibility changes. And this is where divine timing becomes holy to the chosen one. There are seasons when light does not expose you to the crowd. It covers you from them. There are moments when grace is not applause, not proof, not public outline. It is shelter. It is being kept from eyes that would misuse what they cannot understand. So if you have been living in fog, do not insult yourself by agreeing with people who only trust clear weather. Mist has always visited high places. It curls through the pines, beads on cold stone, settles on every ledge. And still, the great body beneath it remains. The ones who are unsettled by your calm may feel bold in this season. They may think your silence means uncertainty now. They may assume that because they cannot see the top, there is no top to see. Let them think it. Cloud has embarrassed many impatient eyes. But here's what makes this part even more serious. When the peak is hidden, the real question is no longer who can admire it. The real question is what holds it steady when nobody can see it at all. And the answer is not in the fog above. It is in what runs deep below, where shaking begins before anyone on the surface understands why. And when the ground speaks from below, the surface has no choice but to tell the truth. Number 14. Shaking reveals what scenery can hide. Fog can make a place look uncertain. Distance can soften the lines. From far away, a ridge can seem gentle when it is anything but. But let the earth shift under it, just a tremor, just a deep groan under the buried mass. And suddenly every loose stone, every cracked seam, every false foothold announces itself. That is the mercy and the terror of shaking. It does not create weakness, it uncovers it. Chosen one, that is why certain seasons in your life felt so severe. Not because heaven had turned against you, but because what was hidden in everyone around you was being tested by movement they could not control. Listen to the sound of it in this place. A faint rumble too low to be thunder. Pebbles ticking down a face that looked still a second ago. Dust lifting from a ledge. A patch of gravel giving way where it was never truly settled. Yet the deeper body holds. The great weight stays. The line remains. That is what unnerved your observers. They thought if enough changed around you, enough shifted beneath you, you would finally lose your form. They expected panic. They expected collapse. They expected the same fear they were carrying inside themselves. But when the shaking came, your hidden roots of stone kept doing what they were built to do. Your calm felt so offensive to unstable people. Calm during clear weather is easy to imitate. Calm during movement cannot be faked for long. When the base trembles, pretense sweats, masks loosen, voices sharpen, and all at once, the ones who had been speaking so confidently start revealing where they were never anchored at all. The trembling found them, not you with a speech. Truth always does. Grace does not cancel testing. It carries you through it. Light does not avoid pressure. It shows what pressure could not destroy. And there is something else the slope teaches here. Shaking is not only about what falls, it is also about what stays. What remains after motion has passed tells you what was real from the beginning. The dust settles. The scattered pieces come to rest. The uneasy watcher below grows very still. Because now they know the difference between a dramatic surface and a trustworthy foundation. And once that difference becomes visible, the next surprise is not destruction. It is provision. Because the same height that endured the pressure is about to release something life-giving down the valley. Number 15. What wounded you can still water others. You can hear it before you see it. That thin sound of meltwater finding its way through a crack in the rock, then dropping into a narrow runnel below. Cold stone holds the heat of the day for a while, then gives it back in a slow release, and the stream begins. That is how the mountain works. What it carries in silence does not stay trapped forever. It becomes movement. It becomes gift. Chosen one, that is holy turning. Something broke you in one place, and now grace is slipping through that same place to reach lower ground. People do not always understand that. They want pain to end cleanly, with a neat line under it. But the mountain does not live that way. It rises without chasing, and it also gives without announcing itself. Snow on the upper face melts into a thread. That thread becomes a trickle, and the trickle feeds the roots that never get thanked by the valley. That is the mystery of your season. What hurt you did not only mark you, it softened you in places where hard people would have stayed sealed shut. It made you careful. It made you wise. And now, without you trying to perform anything, that wisdom is moving downhill into other lives. That is why your calm keeps mattering. Not because you have become untouched, but because you learned how to let the wound become water instead of poison. The old voices wanted you bitter. They wanted the pressure to sour you. They wanted storms break against its slopes to leave you dry and hollow. But the high place did not obey them. It kept its hidden roots of stone, and the hidden roots kept sending life outward. Little green things cling to the lower ledges because something above them still gives. That is your testimony. Real. And the ones watching from below can feel it now, even if they cannot name it. They are closer than before. Close enough to hear the drip under the stone. Near enough to know something is feeding the valley. But they still do not know where the water began, or why the next opening in the rock just started to loosen. And that gift does not stay hidden forever, because once the height has weathered enough pressure, it begins to show itself in plain sight. The light shifts first. That is usually how it happens. A cloud breaks open over the ridge, and suddenly the stone that looked dim a moment ago is sharp again, pale and solid and almost blazing at the edges. Water that was only a whisper in the crack becomes visible, running down in a thin silver line. The summit stands there without effort, and the valley below has no choice but to notice. Chosen one, this is what vindication looks like when it is not loud. It does not sprint, it does not beg, it simply becomes impossible to ignore. That is why your story is changing now. The same people who thought your silence meant nothing are starting to feel its weight. The same ones who watched for collapse are now watching for proof. They are close enough to see what was always there, but not close enough to control it. That is the ache of truth for restless hearts. It arrives when they no longer get to choose the timing. Divine timing is cruel only to the dishonest. To the faithful, it is mercy with perfect hands. And if you have wondered whether all that hidden work mattered, look again. Hidden roots of stone do not announce themselves, but they are the reason a place can hold its shape when the weather gets rough. They are the reason the upper face can stay standing after cloud, cold, shaking, and all the rest. That has been your life too. Structure. So when the light comes back, it does not create your strength. It reveals it. You can feel the watchers shift now. One step, a pause, a longer stare than before. Because what they thought was only distance has started to look like authority. What they thought was only quiet has started to look like command. The mountain rises without chasing, and that fact is beginning to unsettle them in a new way. Because they have finally realized the valley was never the whole story. And just as the mist pulls back from the upper edge, another shadow moves along the lower path. And this one does not look like curiosity anymore. And that lower shape is finally close enough to read the air around it. Number 17. Victory is not applause. Victory is remaining. The rock does not clap for itself. The ridge does not ask for a witness. It just holds. That is the strange offense of it, and also the holy answer. The mountain does not need noise to prove height. It does not need a crowd to confirm weight. It remains what it is, while the weather keeps moving, while the fog keeps thinning, while the last false story keeps losing color in the light. Chosen one, that is what your life has been doing too. Preserving it, becoming proof. That is why the watchers look smaller now. Not because they were destroyed, but because they can no longer pretend the valley told the whole truth. They can see the line of the upper face again. They can see how the storms broke against its slopes and left the summit standing. They can see the hidden roots of stone, at least enough to understand they were never dealing with something flimsy. And that sight changes people. Some bow, some stiffen, some keep staring as if the rock might still give them an easier answer. But the rock does not give easy answers. It gives structure. It gives timing. It gives the hard lesson that what endures does not need to run after anything. Truth does not beg. Grace does not panic. Light does not hurry to defend itself. It simply arrives. And when it arrives, the lower path gets exposed for what it is. The figure there has stopped again. You can feel it in the stillness. No more walking, no more pretending. Just the weight of being seen by something that never moved to meet them. And now the air is changing one more time, because whatever that figure came to do, it has reached the point where turning back would say too much. And then the path makes the choice for them. Number 18. Some truths do not need to chase a confession. They only need clear weather. The shadow on the lower trail steps onto a narrow shelf where the gravel thins and the drop opens. Wind comes hard around the shoulder there, cold and clean, carrying the smell of wet stone and pine bark. The figure stops, looks up once, looks down once, then sideways, toward the long road curving back through the valley. No speech, no grand scene, just that small, unmistakable hesitation that happens when a soul realizes the height was never the enemy. The slope was only refusing to lie. And in that moment, the whole place settles into judgment without a word. Water keeps running from the crack in the rock. Light keeps moving across the upper face. The high ridge does not lean forward to demand anything. It does not rush downhill to be understood. It remains. That is the vindication, chosen one. Every watcher does not suddenly become wise. Every restless heart does not suddenly become pure. But truth stands still long enough for false posture to grow tired in its own body. So the figure turns. Just in that slow, exposed way people turn when the path has shown them more than they wanted to know. Their steps are careful now, smaller. The ridge does not follow. The wind does not celebrate. Even the loose stones make only a faint clicking sound as they settle back into place. The one who came measuring the height leaves having been measured by it, and the valley below, with its roads and rivers and all its noise, must go on bending around what never bowed. That is how real stature answers accusation. It does not shrink or chase applause. At first light, a thin ribbon of water slips from the dark seam in the rock and catches the sun. And for one bright second, it looks like silver thread being pulled from stone. Below it, a patch of moss glows green where there had only been gray the day before. The air softens. The last of the mist lifts off the ledges and drifts into the trees. If this met you right where you stand, stay close to the channel, leave a like, and write "I remain" in the comments so the next soul under pressure knows the ridge is still there.